As always, I seem to find the topics in Scripture that most plague or affect or are top of mind for me. And today we're going to be reading from Acts 27, and hopefully I can relay to you those feelings, those same emotions that I had when reading this chapter. So with election season coming up, we're steadily heading closer and closer towards November, and it seems like every year that we have elections, every 4 years that we choose a president, it doesn't matter who we choose. It doesn't matter who gets elected. In the end, there's always people who are overjoyed, people who are ambivalent, and those who are frankly extremely angry. And I expect what will currently be happening won't be much different. And even those who were overjoyed at the beginning all of a sudden come to the realization that the people that they elected aren't exactly what they envisioned. They had some thought in their mind, they had an idea for who the leader would be like, and as people, they didn't live up to that expectation. So why is everybody concerned? Why do you care? Why does it matter? And it really comes down to the fact that you're now dependent on a person that you really don't have any influence over, to make decisions that'll affect your life. And I think that's what people get really riled up about. They all of a sudden come to the realization that, hey, there's this person that either I voted for or I didn't vote for, who's making decisions that are going to have some impact on my life. And there's an anxiety when the person is going to make the decisions that you don't agree with, and B, you think that the person is going to make the right decisions, but in the end they completely do something opposite. And I'd like for us to explore this idea of what does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean to be the person in charge? What characteristics that we implicitly know belong to a leader, but that we don't really kind of think about. We can kind of say, oh, he was a good leader, or he was a bad leader, he was an okay leader. But what are those things? What are the things that we subconsciously understand make a good leader, and what things do we understand don't really make a good leader? So what we're going to do is we're going to read through Acts 27, and we've got this great individual. He, by all accounts, was a really, really good leader. He was a person who was out front regardless of where he was in terms of the social stature or where he was in terms of his life situation at the moment. So let's walk through Acts and we'll explore what Paul did that made him a good leader. So we're going to start in Acts 27 from verse 1, and we're going to read the first 3 verses. When it was decided that we would sail for Italy, they proceeded to deliver Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. And embarking in an Adramyttium ship, which was about to sail to the regions along the coast of Asia, we put out to sea accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica. The next day we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul with consideration and allowed him to go to his friends and receive care. So this is going to be a super heavy chapter with navigation, and for your convenience, on the programs, you guys are going to find a map. So use this map as a guide, because it'll help you to visualize where these events are taking place. And it's not super important for understanding what a leader's like, but it'll give you a little bit of context as to what's happening. So as we read in the previous chapter, Paul was in Jerusalem. He was sent to Caesarea by Festus, and now he is making his journey to Sidon, and they're going to sail around the little island of Cyprus. So what is the first thing that we notice in these first 3 verses about Paul? So the first thing that we notice is that he was loved. The first characteristic of a leader is that he is loved. Now, this is not a characteristic that comes up first. So in other words, first you're loved and then you become a leader, but rather it's one that comes up as a result of being a good leader. So a good leader in general will be loved. And that's often not the case in the secular world. What we notice is a lot of people have a lot of hate or animosity towards those who are in charge, whether it be bosses, whether it be presidents, whether it be even parents. There's a lot of animosity towards those people. And the reason for that is there isn't a biblical foundation for for that leadership. Or the leader is in some way not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And in general, people dislike having somebody else tell them what to do. And that really becomes a problem when what you're being told to do doesn't agree with what you want to do in your heart. If you've got a God-centered and a God-fearing leader, what's going to happen is if you fear God and you respect what is written in the Bible, you will by default have a respect for that leader because his goals and your goals are identical. Having a God-fearing leader is one of the first things that generates love and affection for those around you. Paul, at this point, he was a prisoner. And at this point in history, the prisons were not like they are today, and prisoners were not treated with the same, I guess, even mild respect that they are now. Now we have protections. Now we have the law, which basically says, if a prison guard beats you to death, that prison guard can be tried for murder. And that wasn't the case here. And in Paul's time, there was no requirement that the person that you were under, your prison master, that he have any kind of respect towards you. As far as he was concerned, you were the lowest of the low, and his job was to get you from one place to another. Whether that was in one piece or in multiple pieces, it really didn't matter. And as you'll read in the end of the chapter, there was not even the requirement that that person had to be alive if the situation warranted it. So the guards even considered killing the prisoners at the end of the chapter. There was no kind of requirement for any kind of respect. Yet what we see here is that Julius gave Paul the respect. He gave him the honor to say, hey, you can go out and you can meet with your friends, you can have fellowship with them, come back to the ship, and we'll continue on our way. And I want to pose a question to you. This question goes out, I know a lot of you might think, oh, well, leadership in terms of like men, leadership in terms of pastors, leadership in terms of some head of state. But I want to ask this to all of you. Are you a person who is loved? All of us in one sense or another are a leader. We either, except for kids maybe, I'm sorry. You guys are going to grow up to be leaders one day. But for most of us, we're a leader in one capacity or another. We're either parents and we've got a family that we lead. We're either in a position, like a managerial position at work, and we lead some employees. All of us in one degree or another are leaders. And you have to ask yourself a question. If your employees, if those who are under you, if your kids, would they say that they love you? Would they say that they respect and they honor you? And I'm not talking about all the time. I mean, obviously there are going to be people who dislike you for one reason or another, and there's not much that you can do about it. But as a whole, are you loved? Are you a person who instills love from the people that you are leading, or is it hate and animosity? What makes a leader, a godly leader, is that they have an irresistible drive. They have an irresistible urge to make those under them love them. Not just surface love, but true deep love. Who see that what you want for them is the best. What you want for them is righteous. What you want for them is right. The second characteristic of a leader is that he uses good judgment. So by this time, they would have gotten to Crete. So if you look at your map, they would have sailed by Myra. So we're going to skip a few verses. But they'll sail by Myra. They'll leave Cnidus, and they'll come to Crete. And we're going to start in verse 9. Now considerable time had passed, and the voyage was now dangerous. So now they're in Fair Havens, and they've been waiting there for a few months or a few weeks, waiting for good weather. So they're coming up at a time when the Mediterranean is starting to change into the winter season, and during winter season, you really didn't want to travel. So they're waiting even at this time for good weather. When considerable time had now passed and the voyage was now dangerous, since even the fast was already over, Paul began to admonish them and said to them, "Men, I perceive that this voyage will certainly be with damage and great loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also our lives." So in these preceding passages, what happened is they stopped at Fair Haven. Now, Fair Haven is a misnomer. It was not actually Fairhaven. It's kind of like a advertising term, like come to Fairhaven, everything's wonderful here. The problem is that this port specifically was not good for wintering in. So in other words, this was not a good place to store your ship over the winter. It was exposed from the south. It had the possibility of being completely exposed to the wind, to the weather. You did not want to stop there. The other problem was that it was boring. There wasn't a lot to do. So what they did is they took a vote. Where are we going to go? And if you look on your map, they stopped on that bottom side of Crete, that little dot. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to go around that horn and go to the other side. At most, it's a day's journey. So that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to basically go around on the other side of Crete. They were going to have a good time there. It was a little bit bigger city. It was called Phoenix. And they were going to spend the winter there. It's sheltered, it's safe. They took a vote. The majority said, let's go. Paul's like, no, don't go. There's going to be a problem. And at this point, Julius respects him, but none of the other passengers really have any reason to consider it more than the opinion of an individual. So, in general, the Mediterranean from about mid-November was completely inaccessible. But starting in mid-September to mid-November was the point when it was called the dangerous season. So summertime was good for sailing, then you had a transitionary period for about 3 months, and then after mid-November till the end of March, you did not go out in the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean at that point was like Florida during hurricane season. Everybody boarded up their houses, everybody made sure they know where to run if a hurricane is coming their way. You did not go out into the Mediterranean. And because it says here that the fast was over, the date that they were approximately going to be leaving was the beginning of October. So way into the dangerous season. And Paul's like, look guys, we can't go out. The captain saw that there was a fair wind. He's like, we can do 1 day. They really just had to sail for 1 day and they would be where they needed to be. But what happened is that did not happen. Paul's words eventually came true. Now, I had a coworker, when he was single, he had boatloads of money. So he had tons of things that he could spend his money on. And one of the things that he decided to spend his money on was learning how to fly. And he would tell all these stories, taking off on an airstrip somewhere in the mountains and coming into Monterey with the fog and having to basically descend blind until you saw the airstrip like literally 30 seconds before you land. And an interesting thought about airplanes is taking off is optional. Landing is not optional. If you take off, you are going to land in one way or another. Taking off is optional, but landing is not. And what Paul was basically doing here is he was taking the former option. He was saying it's better for us not to take off than to land in a crazy situation. And that's what making good judgment calls is about. Good judgment can get you out of a tough situation, but the best thing is not to get yourself in that problem at all. And when you're single, when you're alone, good judgment doesn't really matter as much. At most, you're going to hurt yourself, but you don't have a lot of people that you're going to hurt around you. But when you're a leader, it becomes fundamentally important for you to use good judgment because you're affecting not just yourself, but you're affecting the unit that you lead, the family unit, the working unit. Your bad decision isn't just going to have repercussions on you, it'll have repercussions on everybody. And one of the practical ways that we can use good judgment is making sure that we root out any kind of sin that we have in our life. Oftentimes there will be something that gains a foothold in your life, and you as the leader, you're the one who is taking charge. That sin will not just affect you anymore. That sin will now affect those people who you're under. Now, when you're young, you can avoid good judgment, but when you're older, when you've got people who rely on you, you cannot. Now, making decisions that have an impact, it matters for single people as well. You might think, okay, I'm not married, I don't have anybody under me, but you still have to make those good decisions. The reason being is that character is not something that changes overnight. It's not one day that you're saying, Here, hold my Pepsi, watch this as I'm going to dive off this rock. And then the next day you're like, oh no, that looks extremely dangerous. That's at least 20 feet. I cannot possibly make that jump. That doesn't happen. That transition, that change of mind, it happens slowly. So if you are of the mindset of, here, hold this, watch this, take out your GoPro, take out your phone, do it in slow motion, I want to see some bones break in slow motion. If you've got that mindset right now, if you've got that level of irresponsibility, don't dare drag somebody else into that situation. Don't dare getting married, don't dare getting into a relationship where you can't take responsibility, where you can't act appropriately in that situation. And if you're already married and you still have that mentality, it's urgent that you change it. I've seen so many families where the parents, they never kind of grew out of that childish phase. They never grew out of the mindset of using poor judgment and kind of dealing with the repercussions later. And what happens in those families is not, oh, the kids grow up to be, careful and kind individuals and the parents are still wild in their ways. That doesn't happen. It can't happen. What ends up happening is the children follow the exact same path that the parents led. The employees do the same thing that their employer did. And everything falls apart. Your actions, your mindset has a fundamental responsibility, has a fundamental impact on the individuals who you command. So after leaving Fairhaven, the ship sails quickly. So they made a decision at Fairhaven to leave, and now we come to our third point. Paul's good judgment in the previous verses and the appearance of the angel show us that a great leader speaks with authority. So let's start on verse 21. When they had gone a long time without food, then Paul stood up in their midst and said, "Men, you ought to have followed my advice." Here's the I told you so. "And not have set sail from Crete and incurred this damage and loss. Yet now I urge you to keep up your courage, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only the ship. For this very night an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood before me, saying, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and behold, God has granted all those who are sailing with you.'" So after leaving Fairhaven, they sailed past Claudia. The wind all of a sudden shifted. So they thought they were going to go northwest, and all of a sudden the wind shifted, and now they're going southwest. They maneuver around Claudia, and now they're out in the middle of the ocean. And Paul comes up and he says, "Look, I've had this dream. We're all going to survive." And the first thing that might come to your mind is speaking with authority means you speak with your own authority. Now, for men especially, it's like, I'm the man, I said so, it's going to be so. You have no authority regardless of whether you have an XY chromosome or an XX chromosome. Having a certain set of chromosomes does not give you any kind of authority. It gives you a gender, but it does not give you any kind of innate authority. And that's not what I'm talking about here. A leader speaks with authority, not his own authority. So if you're a boss at work, you speak under the authority of your boss. So you're relaying the information from your boss's boss. A CEO says, "Look, this is what we're doing." The managers underneath say, "Okay, this is what our department is responsible for." The department says, "Okay, this is the piece that we are responsible for as a department." And it all filters down. None of those individuals speak at their own authority. Even the CEO, he is responsible and answers to the board of directors which controls him. Everybody's got a chain of command. And here, Paul doesn't say, "Look, I am Paul who was shipwrecked. I was Paul who was stoned. I was Paul who escaped death many times. I've got more lives than a cat. You guys should listen to me." He doesn't say that. What does he say? He says, "The God to whom I belong and whom I serve has granted you all life." A leader is the one whom God can show his grace through and show his mercy through. God's purpose here was not only to save the people who were here. What was his purpose? What was the point of making that initial prediction? What he's doing is he's laying a foundation. He's laying a foundation on which he can build trust with those who are on the ship, And based on that foundation, he can show his might, he can show his power, he can show that he's the one true God. And Paul could have very well woken up that morning and said, hey, that was a really good dream. I'm going to be super positive now. We're not going to die. None of the people on the ship are going to die. The only thing that's going to happen is the ship's going to crash, but that's fine. And he could have been quiet, and the same effect would have happened. They would have gone out into the sea. They would have crash landed somewhere. They would have run aground somewhere. Everybody would have survived. The end, happy story. But that was not the point of this shipwreck. The point of this shipwreck was to establish the authority of God. So what he goes out and he says, look, everybody, we're going to be all right. This thing's going to happen, but we're going to be all right. And the purpose was to build that foundation. He wanted to build a foundation of respect. He wanted to build a foundation on which God could show his grace. All of us here, that is our responsibility as well. Our responsibility is not to show our authority for the sake of being proven right, for the sake of being looked upon as wise, for the sake of being respected. The purpose of the foundation that God is building is to make sure that our lives are a witness to the world around us. So as a father, as a mother, as a leader in a small group, the only authority that you really have is through God. And if at any point you say, my authority is my own, you cease to have it. You're given authority so that you can show God's work, not so that you can show your own bravery. So a loved leader with good judgment and authority will undoubtedly strengthen those who are under him. And that's the next point. A good leader strengthens those who are under him. In verse 25 it says, therefore keep up your courage, men, for I believe that it will turn out exactly as I have been told. But we must run aground on a certain island. Now this is a weird passage, isn't it, to use as a strengthening passage? Hey guys, we're careening down this hill and my brakes have failed, but I've got some good news for you. I'm going to run into this tree and we're all going to be okay. That is not something that inspires strength in you. That's something like, I don't think you know what you're doing. Maybe we can go up the next hill and the car will stop by itself. And what Paul is saying here is everything will be all right. Even when we crash into the sandbar, even when we run aground, everything will be all right. And what's the purpose of him saying that? The purpose of him saying that is so that those who are under him would know what to expect and they wouldn't have a perspective on the future that is unrealistic. He could have said, hey, everybody, we're going to be all right, and stopped there, and that would have been the truth. But all of a sudden, they would have crashed on a sandbar, and his words would have been put to doubt. Our responsibility is not just to give people a strength that they don't have. Our responsibility is to frame it in such a way that they know exactly what's coming. Now, in this particular day and age, there's constant news about things that are happening and the way that society is changing and the perspectives that society has. And last week, my wife came to me with another article about the transgender bathroom debate. And she had this look of worry and kind of like concern in her eyes, and I can totally understand where she's coming from. The generation that's growing up, it'll grow up in this world, and the things that we currently view as weird or wrong, for them and society as a whole, it will just be another aspect of life. It'll just be the way that the world is. And I want to ask you to answer this question for yourself. What do you do in this situation? Do you run away? Do you find a country where your views align with the views of that society? Do you build a wall? Do you take your kids out of school? Do you put them in a private school? Do you run away? Do you live with the Amish? Like, what do you do? The reality is, no matter how far you run, no matter how many walls you erect around yourself, no matter how much of a bubble you live in, you will never escape human depravity. You will never escape the human heart. You will never escape the thing that is present with all of us. No matter how far you run away, you will still run into situations where what you believe doesn't correspond with what's happening around you. And what we see over and over in the Bible, what we see Paul doing, is not telling people, bury your head in the ground and pretend that the world around you does not exist. He doesn't say, we're in heaven already, and all of the things are going to be according to the way that we want them. That is not his message. His message is, you will run aground, and you will be faced with the current news. You will be faced with future news that's even far worse. But what is his word of advice to those people? He says, be strengthened, because what I'm telling you is you will run aground. You will run aground on the transgender debate. You will run aground on debates far worse than that. But the only thing that you need to focus on, the only thing you need to be worried about is, are you doing the will of God? Are you doing and following his word the way that it is written? The world around you will crumble. Are you going to be the fortress that keeps this word? Don't bury your head in the ground and pretend that what is coming isn't going to arrive, because it will. And the Bible tells us that it will. And the Bible tells us that it will arrive even worse than it currently is. And our preparedness for that, our strengthening of ourselves, our strengthening of our children, our strengthening of those who are under us, is fundamentally important for us to weather that storm. So that when the time comes when things are worse, we don't throw up our hands and say, I thought it was going to get better, because it's not. And being able to predict that, being able to see that, is very, very important. And now the final trait of a leader. A leader leads by example. Verse 27. But when the 14th night came, as we were being driven about in the Adriatic Sea, about midnight, the sailors began to surmise that they were approaching some land. So if you look at your map, there's this little squiggly line because nobody knows where they went. But it's still amazing. I mean, if you look at where they started and where they hit Malta, that is God's providence. That is God's guidance that they would stumble upon that shore. Right below that line, that squiggly line, is a set of beaches where almost all the ships that get stuck out in the Mediterranean during that season, that dangerous season, they end up. So it was very likely they could have gone south very quickly, crashed on the rocks there, and who knows what would have happened to them. But through God's providence, they basically made a beeline for Malta. So on the 14th night, they were being driven about in the Adriatic Sea. About midnight, the sailors began to surmise that they were approaching some land. They took soundings, so they dropped these weights attached to ropes. They took soundings and found it to be 20 fathoms, so about 120 feet. And a little farther, they took another sounding and found it to be 15 fathoms, 60 feet. Fearing that they might run aground somewhere on the rocks, they cast 4 anchors from the stern and wished for daybreak. So it's not a good idea to crash into rocks at night when you can't see anything. So far, so good. But as the sailors were trying to escape from the ship, if all of a sudden the crew starts panicking on a ship, you know stuff's about to go down. You do not want to be on a ship where the captain's like, hey, where's the lifeboats? Trying to escape from the ship and had let down the ship's boat into the sea, so a little dinghy, on the pretense of intending to lay out anchors from the bow. Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, unless these men remain in the ship, you yourselves cannot be saved. Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the ship's boat and let it fall away. Until the day was about to dawn, Paul was encouraging them all to take some food, saying, today is the 14th day that you have been constantly watching and going without eating, having taken nothing. Therefore I encourage you to take some food, for this is your preservation. For not a hair on your head of any of you will perish. Having said this, he took bread and gave thanks to God in the presence of all, and he broke it and began to eat. All of them were encouraged, and they themselves took food. All of us in the ship were 276 persons. When they had eaten enough, they began to lighten the ship by throwing out the wheat into the sea. So I want you guys to look around the room, like literally right now. Turn around and look at how many people there are in the room. There's not 267 of us here. But that is approximately a little bit more than what we have here is how many were on that ship. This is how many people were stuck together and they were in a life or death situation. And out of those 276, 275 were not leaders. 275 did not know what to do. And 275 did not have a good example to show. The sailors showed a very bad example. 275 didn't have a good example to show. And if you guys remember just one thing about the sermon, just one of the points, let it be this: a leader leads by example. A leader cannot effectively lead if those in charge don't know what to do. If those who are under him don't know what to do. So the purpose of a leader being out in front is to let those who are doing things know what to do. Now, I have this common experience with my son. He's 1 year old, and I told him to go get a toy on the floor. And I pointed to it, and I told him in English. And I don't know if I pointed wrong or if he doesn't understand English, but he just stood there looking at me blankly. It was only when I went, took him by the hand, picked up the toy and gave it to him that finally a light bulb went off that that's what Daddy wanted. And that's sometimes what we have to do as leaders. Paul did not command everybody to eat and then say, oh, no, thank you, I'm a carnivore, I don't eat wheat. You know, all we have is wheat here, so I'm not going to eat anything. He didn't say be encouraged and then go lie in the fetal position at the back of the ship. He led by example. He was out front. He was doing those things first before anybody else was doing it. And like I said, we had this wonderful contrast of people who were supposed to be leaders who weren't acting that way by trying to escape off of the ship. And then we had Paul, who was a prisoner, who was not a rich person. He didn't have any stature. He didn't have any position on that ship. He wasn't the captain. He didn't have any sailing experience. He had 2 other shipwrecks before that, but that technically doesn't count as good experience for this situation. He was a person of no authority, and yet he comes out on top. And remember how in point 2 I said a leader uses good judgment. The other reason for that is that sometimes those who are under you don't have the ability to use good judgment. So for children, that's very specific. For those who are under you at work, they might not be the best decision makers. Your responsibility is to use that good judgment for them, to be that strength for them. In World War II, there was a division called the 101st, and they did a series on them called Band of Brothers on HBO. This was a long time ago. And one of the main characters was Major Winters. And he started off as second lieutenant, so he was basically doing all the odd jobs for the higher-ups. But over the course of the war, he slowly ranked up because of his leadership skills. And one of the things that kind of stood out to me most of all, out of all of the different character traits that he had that love of his men, he had the right decision-making, he had the authority. But the thing that stood out at me the most was the fact that he would always lead. And he wrote a book after the war, and in it he laid out 10 points for leadership. And one of them was lead by example. Lead from the front. Say, follow me, and then lead the way. Now, this specific moment that comes to mind, it happened in Holland in 1944. A night patrol had found a company of German soldiers. A company is about 100 to 250 men. They reported back, and Winters was tasked with basically going and fighting them. They were going to ambush them. They were going to try to scare them away. So what happens is in the morning, he takes 2 squads of about 10 to 20 soldiers, and he comes out. They make a plan. The mortars are going to fire on the levees. So basically there were embankments all around, so levees, and they were in a ditch in one of the levees where there was a low spot. So they were going to fire on the road on top of the levees. The machine gunners were going to give him cover, and he was going to lead a charge by himself, and his men were going to follow him. So what happened is he was going to give the signal, and he ran. And he was the first one out, and he ran. He threw a smoke grenade that was going to be the signal. As soon as that popped off, his men ran behind him. But at no point during his run did he turn around and see if anybody was following. At no point did he stop and say, okay, I got to let him catch up. I mean, there's like 200 men out there, and I'm just one guy. He ran in a full sprint all the way up into the levee. He stood up. He fired the first shot. He got off 2 clips of 6 bullets before the other men caught up to him. And that was when the attack finally commenced. And that just blew my mind. How can an individual come up and have the courage, have the ability to stand in front of 200 people and start shooting at them? But that's what he did. He had the courage that none of his other men had. And like Paul and like Winters, there will be moments where you have to take the initiative. It's not something that you want to do, and it takes willpower. It takes a mental readiness to do those things. But they need to be done. Our natural character is to be in a group. You know, whenever you're out at an event, so family day, for example, what you'll notice is there aren't really any people that are kind of by themselves. Everybody's clustered into their own clique. Everybody's clustered in their own group, families or friends or some other means of tying them together. Nobody wants to be on their own. Nobody wants to be out front. But that's exactly what's required in order for us to be leaders. We have to be leading by example. And this trait, this leading by example, it's fundamental to the rest of them. And that's why I said if you remember only one thing, it'll be this. It is fundamental that you lead by example. If you lead by example, you will be loved. Because those who see you out front before they're out front will understand that you care for them. It's very easy to send somebody out and say, hey buddy, here's a pea shooter, go blow up that tank. It's very easy to do that. What's very difficult to do is say, here, give me that pea shooter, I'm going to go out and deal with that tank. It's very easy to go out and say, hey, do this and this, when you yourself are not willing to do that. A leader cannot strengthen others if he's on the background, calling the shots. It's very difficult for a commander to say, hey guys, run into a flurry of machine gun fire. I'm going to sit back here with binoculars and I'm going to watch and make sure that all of you make it. And if you need more men and you all get mowed down, I'll be sure to send them for you. It's very hard to strengthen people when you have that kind of attitude. Now this might be a very difficult burden. And you might say, hey, this is not something that I can bear. I'm not ready to be a leader. There are people who might be ready to run out and be at the front and do what needs to be done, but that's not me. But the fact is that we all are not technically leaders. We're all technically followers. The hierarchy that a company follows, CEO, managers, department heads, that same hierarchy exists in Scripture. And Paul said that in Corinthians. He said, follow my example as I followed Christ. He didn't say follow my example, period. He said follow my example, which is really Christ's example. Wanted leaders, which is the title of the sermon, is identical to wanted followers. We have a leader who went through and exhibited all of the characteristics that I was talking about for us. He's already out front. We're not going to be the ones out front. He's already out front. Christ displayed love. Christ displayed good judgment calls. Christ displayed strengthening. Christ displayed leading from the front. He did all those things for us already. We've got that leader in front of us. And our job is not just to follow him, but it's to say, hey guys, we all need to go. We're all leaders in one capacity or another. When they rebooted Star Wars Episode 1, not the one that came out right now, Obi-Wan Kenobi wanted to be a Jedi, and he studied under Liam Neeson. Around the same time, they rebooted Star Wars, and when Bruce Wayne wanted to be the Caped Crusader, he studied under Liam Neeson. Around the same time, Orlando Bloom wanted to become a Crusader in Kingdom of Heaven. And you know what? He went and he studied sword fighting skills under Liam Neeson. What is the deal with Liam Neeson? What Hollywood realizes, what we so often neglect, is that we need somebody to lead. We need somebody who can instruct. We need somebody who will teach. We need that person, and we have that person in Christ. And there are those who are coming behind us who also need that person, and they have Christ, and they have us as an example. William Tennant was a preacher in the 1700s in America, and he was boring. Like, you think I'm boring? He was like far worse. He was like 10 times worse. But what he did, and his church, like, they tried to kick him out a few times. It didn't work. They're not Baptists, so it's really hard to kick out a preacher in some places. So what he did is he started a log cabin college in the back of his yard. And he took 5 men and he taught them. And he taught them the ways of the Lord. He taught them Scripture. He taught them zeal. He taught them all of these things. And those 5 men went out and they did God's work. And he took more men and he took more men. And people made fun of him. They said, oh, this is William Tennant's log cabin college. But he didn't care. He was concerned with one thing: creating those followers who would then turn into leaders. At this point, William Tennant's log cabin college is better known as Princeton. And that's what happens. We might think that we don't have the gift, we don't have the strength, we don't have the whatever it is. Whatever is, your stumbling block. We don't have the capacity in the end. What it comes down to is, I don't have the capacity to be a leader. But you do. Everybody is talented enough and gifted enough because we're strengthened through our leader. And I want all of us to be able to stand at front and call to everybody and say, follow me. Let's stand in prayer. I'll give you a minute to pray and then I'll conclude. Heavenly Father and Lord, I am utterly grateful that I stand as a follower of you. I realize that I have no potential and no willingness to lead apart from you. I have no capability, I have no gift, I have nothing apart from what you inspire me to do, Lord. But I also realize that the world is in need of leaders. The church is in need of leaders. The church is in need of men and women who are willing to stand at the front and say, follow me. Willing to stand at the front and say, God will keep you, God will sustain you, God will strengthen you. Lord, we have a desperate need for people like that. And I ask that you would speak to the hearts of those who are listening and encourage them to realize that you've given us all the gift of leadership. You've given us all the gift and the strength and the wisdom and everything that we need to lead others to you and to stand and do the work that needs to be done here on earth. We ask that you continue to strengthen us and give us your love, give us your support in all the days that come. Amen.